In Bolivia, the government denounced plans promoted by the right wing to destabilize the nation and curtail President Luis Arce's term of office. In El Salvador, authorities registered over 68,000 arrests under the state of exception in force since March 2022 to fight gang violence. And also in Sudan, several nations begin evacuating their citizens as the second week of fighting between the army and the paramilitary group Rapid Support Forces continues. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. The Bolivian government denounced plots from right-wing forces to destabilize the country to undermine President Luis Arce Catacora's administration. During a cabinet meeting, the Bolivian head of state and the vice president David Choquehuanca denounced that the national and international right wing seeks to create uncertainty and anxiety among the Bolivian people. The purpose is to promote the idea of an economic crisis, paving the way for a political crisis. The final statement says that the economic stability is a common heritage of the Bolivian people, and its reconstruction is a governmental priority. In this sense, Luis Arce's government calls on Bolivians to be absolutely confident that his administration cares for the national economy and tirelessly works for its steady growth with social justice. Colombia celebrates Bogotá's 35th International Book Fair with the participation of some 500 guests from 25 countries. Since last Tuesday, April 18th, different authors have participated in more than 1,800 activities, following the cultural program of Filbo 2023, celebrated in Corferias, located in the fairgrounds of the Colombian capital. In this event, which will cover a whole week, writers from all over the world will present their books in a wide variety of literary proposals, including novels, children's books, self-improvement, fiction stories, and biographies. Other parts of Bogotá and cities like Medellín, Popayán, and Cúcuta will be housing many other activities, such as talks on Colombian cultural heritage and the importance of culture in the construction of peace. India and the 15 Caribbean community countries of CARICOM agreed to hold an annual business summit to address common aspirations and challenges. The information was released by His Excellency Subrahmanyan Jaishankar, the Indian Foreign Minister, in Georgetown, the capital of Guyana, where he is currently in the framework of a 4-day visit to that country. This summit, which date has not been announced yet, will be held alternatively in India and in the Caribbean country. Shroff, the chairman of the Indian Industry Confederation, noted that Guyana is attracting growing international interest with the recent discovery of oil and gas in that country, which has opened up tremendous opportunities for this development. Shroff called for greater cooperation between his country and the Caribbean and Latin America. The government of El Salvador totals almost 68,000 arrests under the state of exception in force since March 27, 2022. The measure, which has been enforced for over a year, has been criticized in several occasions by other political forces and humanitarian rights organizations. Opponents of the measure claim that it has an unacceptable cost for the people and call on the executive branch to develop a comprehensive security plan to solve the gang problem without violating human rights and constitutional guarantees. Meanwhile, authorities detailed that as of April 16th, over 3,000 vehicles, 2,000 firearms, and some 16,000 cell phones have been seized. And the gun sales soar in the U.S. amid a new wave of mass shootings. Only in April, the nation saw 4 people shot, 1 fatally in New York, Kansas City, and Texas. According to figures from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, in 2021, firearm deaths surpassed those caused by motor vehicle traffic, 48,830 to 48,404. The number of instant criminal background checks processes required before a gun can be purchased is also increasing. There are 120 firearms for every 100 U.S. citizens, according to the Swiss organization Small Arms Survey. The organization researchers estimate that citizens owned 393 million of the 857 million civilian guns available, representing about 46% of the world's arsenal. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva signed a total of 13 agreements and alliances with Portugal during the 13th Luso-Brazilian Summit as part of his official visit to the European nation. According to official reports, the agreements cover areas such as culture, education, health, transportation, science, tourism and technology, including a memorandum of understanding between the space agencies of Brazil and Portugal. The equivalence of degrees in basic and higher education are also among the agreements signed, which will facilitate the entry of students from both nations, as well as the mutual recognition of driver licenses. The other cooperation treaties refer to improvements in the area of health, witness protection, good practices, and the rights of people with disabilities, energy, biometric research, and communications. Hundreds of people marched in the city of Madrid to remember Spanish cameraman José Couso, who was killed in Iraq in 2003, when the U.S. occupying forces attacked the Palestine hotel in Baghdad. So far, the investigation has not clarified the details of his death, and Couso's family is calling for justice. A day before U.S. troops took over the Iraqi capital in 2003, their tanks carried out several attacks that allegedly targeted the international press. 3 reporters covering the war were killed there. Meanwhile, official data indicate that at least 230 media workers were killed during the U.S. invasion of Iraqi territory. José Couso is among those killed, and his acquaintances are still demanding an investigation into his death. Couso's family has appealed to the highest judicial authorities in Spain without response. Then the relatives undertook the search for justice at the European Court of Human Rights, which has not yet ruled. In Sweden, citizens protest against the country's nomination to become a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, led by the United States. Under the slogans, "No to NATO, NATO's war will get our children killed for $1, citizens mobilized in 17 countries to call on officials to adhere to the country's traditional foreign policy path, which involves staying away from military alliances and remaining neutral. In that sense, they expressed their rejection to the ongoing military exercise Aurora 23, an event in which 26,000 participants, mainly from NATO member states, have gathered to train with the Swedish armed forces. Those mobilized consider NATO to be a war alliance that could drag Sweden into a conflict they say do not want to be part of. In France, the National Federation of Mines and Energy, FNME, one of the trade unions that is part of the General Confederation of Labor, the CGT, announced 100 days of action and anger against the government of President Emmanuel Macron. The Federation statement said that in the face of Macron's words of 100 days of appeasement, they promised him 100 days of action and anger. It also set a National Day of Energetic Anger for May 3rd and encouraged Macron to resign. The Federation threatened power cuts during events of global interest such as the Cannes Film Festival, the Roland Garros tournament, and the Formula One Monaco Grand Prix. The union pledged response to the anti-democratic methods of the country's authorities, who approved a controversial pension reform pushed by the President Emmanuel Macron, pushing back the retirement age from 62 to 64.
President Macron was again...
In Italy, the government studies the possibility of abandoning the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative in face of growing tensions between the United States and the Asian giant. According to local media, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni wanted to make an announcement about Italy's involvement in the initiative before the Group of Seven, to be held from May 19th to the 21st in Japan. However, because opinions on the agreement are divided within Meloni's administration, she has been cautious about making a statement. Italy is the only G7 country to join the initiative, having signed a memorandum of understanding with China in 2019. Experts estimate that trade and diplomatic relations between Italy and China could be affected if the European nation decides not to renew the treaty. The Russian government warned about the termination of the grain agreement if the G7 vetoed all exports for its market. National Security Council Vice President Dmitry Medvedev said that should G7 enforce the measure, Russia would respond with a reciprocal ban on imports from Moscow, including the most sensitive categories of goods for the G7, such as the Black Sea Grain Agreement, which allows grain exports from Ukraine. On April 20th, G7 member countries confirmed they were considering the modification of the current sanctions regime to veto all exports to Russia, except those granted special exemption, such as medicines and agricultural products, including food. According to local media, the new restriction could be made official during the G7 summit in Hiroshima, to be held next May. The U.S. authorities did not issue entry visas to Russian journalists accompanying Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on his trip to the UN headquarters in New York to participate in the Security Council meetings. Let's listen to what the head of the Russian diplomacy said in response to what he called rude behavior.
We will have to work for you too. We will have to show more energy to deliver the truth to the world community. Try to keep track of what we will be doing through our channels and spread the truth. A country that calls itself the strongest, smartest, free, has just chickened out. They did a stupid thing and showed what oaths and pledges to protect freedom of speech, access to information are really worth.
TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries using StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Several countries started evacuations of their citizens in Sudan following armed clashes between the army and the paramilitary group Rapid Support Forces, the RSF. Saudi Arabia evacuated its citizens first, both by land and sea. Afterwards, the United States and the United Kingdom evacuated all their personnel in Khartoum, the country's capital. For its part, France removed its diplomatic mission from Sudan and some other 250 citizens. Meanwhile, Chinese diplomatic staff called on their nationals in Sudan to evacuate, while Turkey managed to transport 140 citizens by land and Egypt 436. Likewise, Lebanon evacuated 60 nationals by sea, and Greece stated that the first group of its citizens, including 2 wounded, left Sudan on a flight to Djibouti with the help of France. And the United Nations World Food Programme warned of an exodus of refugees from Sudan to neighboring Chad amid continued fighting between the country's army and the Rapid Support Forces. Meanwhile, the program reported that it is preparing to receive at least 100,000 citizens after confirming that some 20,000 Sudanese had already crossed the common border into Chad a week after fighting broke out in the capital Khartoum and other areas of the country. Meanwhile, more than 400,000 refugees from Sudan live in eastern Chad. The new arrivals pose an additional challenge to the country's stretched public services and resources. In Israel, thousands of people took to the streets for the 16th consecutive week in rejection of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's judicial reform. Tens of thousands demonstrated in Tel Aviv and other Israeli cities against the controversial bill, which they see as an attack on democracy. The demonstrations continue even though the government coalition announced on March 27th a pause to start a period of dialogue. Opponents of the bill denounce that this reform seeks to weaken the justice system and expands the Prime Minister's powers.
We come every week and we are concerned about the government's plan to reform the judicial system that will turn Israel from a democracy into a dictatorial government of corrupted thieves.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and also TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.